The old money district of Oakhaven always felt like it was holding its breath. Grand, sprawling houses stood like silent sentinels, their dark windows reflecting the sky, their manicured lawns stretching out like vast, unblinking green eyes. A profound silence hung in the air, so deep and constant it seemed to hum, a low, unsettling vibration beneath the surface of everything. That's why, despite the chill it sent down my spine, I, Alara Vance, had jumped at the chance to house-sit Blackwood Manor. The owners, the reclusive Thorne family, were embarking on an extended European tour, leaving me this grand, dusty mausoleum for a pittance. "Just keep an eye on things," Mrs. Thorne had murmured during our brief, awkward handover, her eyes a little too wide, a strange, almost frantic energy in their depths. "And please don't mind this settling." Blackwood Manor was magnificent, no doubt. Its towering facade, a testament to forgotten grandeur, loomed against the Oakhaven skyline. But it carried a weight, a heavy, oppressive presence that pressed in from all sides. The air inside wasn't just old, it was thick, cloying, imbued with the scent of aged wood, decaying velvet, and something else, something cold, still, and faintly metallic, like forgotten pennies or old blood. Every breath I took felt heavy, as if the very atoms of the house were resisting my presence. The main staircase, a sweeping curve of polished mahogany, groaned under my foot with each ascent, sounding less like wood settling and more like a weary giant sighing beneath my weight. The shadows in the long, ornate hallways, draped in heavy tapestries and dark portraits, seemed to shift and deepen with a life of their own, coiling in corners, stretching out like grasping fingers. My bedroom, a vast, echoing chamber dominated by a four-poster bed draped in heavy, dust-laden velvet, felt like a stage set for a forgotten play. It had a peculiar, oversized wardrobe tucked into one corner. It was a beautiful piece, carved with dark, winding vines that seemed to writhe in the dim light, but its sheer depth felt unnatural. Like it didn't just hold clothes, it swallowed light, and perhaps something more. For the first few weeks, I tried to convince myself it was just the usual old house quirks. The persistent creaks that echoed through the night like skeletal footsteps. The wind whistling through drafty windows, a mournful, drawn-out cry that sounded eerily human. The distant hoot of an owl, too close, too regular, seeming to punctuate the oppressive quiet. Then, the whisper started. Faint, like a sigh on the wind, a breathy murmur just at the absolute edge of hearing. Sometimes I'd pause, straining, convinced I'd caught a word, a name, but it would always dissipate into the silence before I could grasp it. I dismissed them, of course, rationalizing that my imagination, unaccustomed to such isolation and silence, was simply playing tricks in this vast, echoing place. But then came the scratching. It wasn't the skittering of mice. This was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It sounded like fingernails, long and sharp, dragging across rough wood, a relentless, grating sound. It came from inside the wardrobe itself, a persistent rasping that began subtly, then grew, pulling at the frayed edges of my sleep. I tried to ignore it, burying my head under pillows, telling myself it was just the old house settling, or perhaps a tenacious branch scraping against the outside wall. But the sound was too precise, too internal. It persisted, a soft, insidious gnawing at my sanity, stealing snippets of my rest night after night. And then, the true horror began. The knocking. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a slow, heavy thump, thump, thump. A methodical, ponderous sound that reverberated through the very floorboards, shaking the air around me. It was not random. It was a ritual. Always 3 distinct knocks. Always at precisely 2:07 a.m. Every single night. The first time it happened, I shot upright in bed, my heart hammering like a trapped bird against my ribs, convinced someone was at the bedroom door. But there was never anyone. The second night, I braced myself, staring at the door, but the sound came from within the wall behind the wardrobe. By the third, a cold, hard knot of dread had settled in my stomach. This wasn't the house settling. This was something else. Something intentional. I called the Thornes estate manager, Mr. Caldwell, the very next morning. His voice, when he finally answered, was smooth and unctuous, a silken mask. He just chuckled, a dry, brittle sound, when I tried to explain the knocks. "Oh, that old thing? Probably just the pipes, Miss Vance. The manor has character, you see. Lots of old pipes." But the knocking didn't sound like pipes. It sounded like something inside the house. Something living, or once living, trapped. His dismissal, too easy, too practiced, only amplified my unease. I felt a prickle of irritation, then a deeper chill of foreboding. He hadn't sounded surprised. One particularly restless night, after the customary 2:07 a.m. serenade had left me wide awake, bathed in a cold sweat, I could take it no more. The silence that followed the knocks felt heavier than usual, a suffocating blanket woven from dread. My mind, usually sharp and logical, was fraying at the edges. I got out of bed, my bare feet cold against the ancient, creaking floorboards. I walked slowly, deliberately, towards the massive wardrobe. In the faint moonlight filtering through the tall windows, its dark would seem to pulse with an inner darkness. Its back panel, I noticed, looked different. The front was dark, polished, carved with exquisite detail, but the section facing the wall was rougher, unfinished, a cheap, almost crudely installed plywood afterthought. It didn't match the rest of the grand piece. My hand trembled as I pressed against it. The plywood gave way slightly, just enough to reveal a sliver of inky darkness behind it. A breath of stale, icy air brushed against my face, carrying a faint, unsettling aroma, a mix of dust, earth, and something indescribably sour, like old, trapped breath. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the cavernous room. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that what lay beyond that panel was not mundane. Driven by a desperate need to understand, to rationalize, to unearth the source of the terror, I fumbled through the desk drawer and found an old, ornate letter opener. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, struggled to grip it. Carefully, slowly, I began to pry around the edges of the makeshift panel. The dried caulk cracked and flaked away, smelling of age and decay. With a soft groan of protesting wood, a sound like a muted cry, the panel gave way, swinging inward just enough to reveal a hidden passage. It wasn't just a small closet or a shallow recess. It was a narrow, twisting corridor, swallowed by shadows that seemed to drink the meager light from my phone. The air inside was thick and cold, pressing in, smelling strongly of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sweet, like iron mixed with something sickly floral. My phone flashlight beam, a thin, wavering spear, cut through the gloom, revealing walls of rough-hewn, unfinished stone, unlike any other part of the house. This was not part of the original design. This was something secret, something added. And then, at the end of the short, claustrophobic passage, the corridor opened into a small, windowless chamber. It was barely big enough for me to stand upright. In the center, a single, rusty iron chair stood bolted to the stone floor. Its surfaces were pitted with age and corrosion, and heavy, rusted chains hung from its arms and legs, clinking faintly as I moved. On a crude, rough-hewn stone slab nearby, an assortment of terrifying implements lay glinting dully in the weak light, crude, thick-bladed knives, a small, menacing bone saw, and a collection of strangely shaped hooks, their points dark with what I desperately hoped was only rust. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I didn't want to think about what those tools were for. I didn't want to imagine. But the real horror, the thing that would forever scar my memory, was on the walls. Scratched, carved, and smeared into the rough stone were symbols I didn't recognize, alongside countless names. Some were ancient, almost faded into the stone by time, barely visible whispers. Others looked starkly fresh, as if carved just yesterday, the edges sharp, the dust still clinging to their lines. My breath caught in my throat. And then, among them, I saw a name, etched deeper than the rest, almost angrily, with a desperate, furious energy, Eleanor Thorne. Eleanor Thorne. The name was vaguely familiar. She was the Thorne family's youngest daughter, who had supposedly eloped, decades ago, with a charming rogue, a scandalous tale whispered in hushed tones in Oakhaven. She was never spoken of again by the family, her memory carefully erased, supposedly a rebellious free spirit who had simply chosen a different path. But here was her name, scratched into stone, among dozens of others, not as a memory, but as a chilling record. My blood ran cold, turning to ice in my veins. This wasn't a runaway. This was a prisoner. I stumbled out of the passage, my legs feeling like jelly, slamming the wardrobe doors shut with a desperate, ragged gasp. My lungs burned for air, as if I'd been holding my breath for an hour. I ran out of the bedroom, nearly tripping over the thick rug, my mind screaming. I called the Oakhaven Sheriff's Department immediately, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form coherent words. I sounded like a lunatic. They arrived, 2 grim-faced deputies, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive gloom of the manor. They examined the hidden room, their faces betraying no emotion, though I saw one deputy's jaw clench. They took photos, their flashes momentarily illuminating the unspeakable horror, and asked me a million questions, their voices flat, official. But when they checked town records, Eleanor Thorne was listed simply as missing, presumed runaway. No official search. No real investigation. It was like the town itself, corrupted by the Thornes' influence, had chosen to forget her. Just like Mr. Caldwell. The deputies left, their promise to investigate further, ringing hollow in the silent house. I couldn't stay another night in Blackwood Manor. The very air felt poisoned, tainted by the echoes of despair and suffering. I fled to a friend's small, brightly lit apartment across town. The image of those names, of Eleanor Thorne's name, burned into my mind, flickering behind my eyelids every time I closed them. But the next morning, as I gathered some essentials from my friend's spare room, trying desperately to construct a semblance of normalcy, I heard it. Not from the wall this time. Not from a dark corridor. From the hallway outside the bedroom door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Thump, thump, thump. The sound was unmistakable, heavy and resonant. It was closer than it had any right to be. My breath hitched. A cold, sharp spear of fear pierced through the thin veneer of safety I'd tried to build. I didn't stick around to see what was on the other side of that door. I just froze, then backed away slowly, my heart a frantic drum, and waited for my friend to get home. It's been a week since I bolted from Blackwood Manor. A week of living on my friend's couch, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound. Mr. Caldwell, the Thornes' estate manager, has been impossible. His voice, when he finally returns my increasingly frantic calls, is sickly sweet, dripping with thinly veiled menace. He claims I fabricated the hidden room and maliciously damaged historic property, threatening legal action if I don't return and continue my duties. Such a shame, Miss Vance, he purred, to ruin such a good opportunity. When I pressed him about Eleanor Thorne, his perfectly polite facade cracked. For a split second, I saw it, a flicker of something dark, cold, and ancient in his eyes, a momentary slip in his practiced composure, before he abruptly hung up. He knew. He had always known. I finally managed to convince Detective Miller, one of the deputies who'd initially responded, to dig deeper. He sounded tired, burdened, but something in my persistent, desperate pleas must have finally broken through his professional detachment. It turns out the Thorne family lineage in Oakhaven goes back centuries, interwoven with the very fabric of the town. Blackwood Manor itself wasn't just a home. It was the original Thorne family estate, the heart of their power and influence. Old town archives, dusty and neglected, spoke of a family vault beneath the property, a private burial ground, though details were sparse and contradictory, deliberately obscured. There were also hushed rumors, almost entirely forgotten, of disappearances from the estate throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, servants, distant relatives, even occasional guests, all attributed to unfortunate accidents, sudden illnesses, or simply wandering off into the vast, unforgiving woods surrounding Oakhaven. A chilling pattern began to emerge, a history of convenient forgetting. My nights are now a torment of vivid nightmares. Sleep offers no escape, only a deeper descent into terror. I'm in that iron chair, cold and unforgiving, the rusty chains biting into my skin, the stench of decay thick in my nostrils. A shadowy figure looms over me, its face obscured, shifting, never quite resolving. It whispers, a voice like dry leaves scraping pavement, like sand hissing on glass. "You shouldn't have seen. You shouldn't have known." I wake up screaming, tangled in my friend's spare sheets, my breath ragged. In the mornings, when I look in the mirror, there are faint, raw marks on my wrists, like I've been struggling against restraints, like invisible fingers have tightened around my flesh. They are faint, but undeniably there. Last night, something chilling happened, something that shattered the illusion of safety my friend's apartment provided. My friend's usually placid Siamese cat, Luna, a creature of serene indifference, suddenly arched her back, her fur bristling like static electricity. Her tail bushed out, and she let out a guttural hiss at the closed bedroom door. Her eyes, wide and dilated, stared fixedly at something I couldn't see. Then, at exactly 2:07 a.m., came the familiar, sickening sound. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Thump, thump, thump. But not on the door. Not from the hallway. The sound vibrated from inside the room. From directly under the bed where I lay, trying to hold my breath, trying to disappear. I didn't scream this time. There was no air left in my lungs for it. Just a cold, dread certainty that settled over me, heavier than any blanket, colder than any ice. Whatever was in Blackwood Manor, it wasn't bound by its walls anymore. It had found me. It had followed me. I called Detective Miller immediately, my voice a thin, reedy whisper on the phone. He sounded even more tired than usual, almost resigned, as if he too was living in a nightmare he couldn't escape. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice low, heavy with unspoken implications. "I think you need to come down to the station. We found something interesting." When I arrived, the station felt unnaturally quiet, the air thick with unspoken secrets. Miller led me to a dusty old family tree of the Thorne lineage he'd unearthed from some obscure archive. It was extensive, going back generations, a twisted, gnarled root system of privilege and power. And there, beside a branch from the early 1900s, was a name I recognized instantly, a name that struck me with a chilling jolt of recognition, Eleanor Vance. My great-grandmother. And beneath her name, a faded, shaky, handwritten note, almost illegible. "Disappeared from Oakhaven, presumed lost to the woods. The blood calls." My own last name. Vance. I stared at it, a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning creeping up my spine, seeping into my bones. "What does this mean?" I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Miller sighed, running a hand through his hair, his gaze distant, as if seeing horrors in the past. "We also found something else in the manor's original foundation plans, something the Thornes meticulously hid from public record for centuries. A hidden chamber, deep beneath the main house, beneath the very foundations, marked cryptically as Thorne family sanctum. And records of a peculiar, horrifying Thorne family tradition. For generations, the eldest male heir, upon reaching a certain age, would commune with the ancestors in this sanctum. A rite of passage, they called it. A way to ensure the family's continued prosperity and influence. But there were always rumors of what that communion truly entailed. Whispers of a dark bargain." He paused, his eyes serious, locking with mine, as if preparing me for a blow. "The names on the walls, Ms. Vance. They aren't just random victims. Many of them share Thorne blood, or were closely connected to the family. We believe the Thorne family hasn't been burying their missing relatives. They've been trapping them, binding their spirits within that hidden space, using them, powering something, maintaining the family's good fortune and long life through a grotesque necromancy." He then showed me a final, chilling discovery from a locked, dust-covered box of Thorne family records, an ancient, faded diary, its leather cover crumbling to the touch, belonging to a Thorne ancestor from the 1700s. The brittle pages crackled as he turned them to a specific entry. A passage, written in a spidery, archaic script, jumped out at me. "The blood rite requires a vessel. One of the lineage untouched by the darkness, untainted by the direct corruption, to contain and anchor the spirits. If the vessel is broken, or chosen improperly, the spirits are unleashed. And the bloodline is marked cursed until a new vessel is found. Suddenly, the cold truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. The constant knocking, the pervasive feeling of being watched, the terrifying nightmares of being strapped down, the marks on my wrists. It wasn't just a spirit unleashed. It was many. A chorus of tormented souls, echoing centuries of suffering. And they weren't just targeting me because I found the room, because I stumbled upon their torment. I was the vessel. My great-grandmother, Eleanor Vance, hadn't just disappeared into the woods. She had been the last vessel, a distant relative with the right lineage, deliberately brought to Blackwood Manor. The Thorne family, through some dark manipulation, had brought her there, just as they brought me, to renew their dark pact. When I, another descendant, walked into Blackwood Manor, I had unknowingly activated something ancient and malevolent. The spirits, bound for centuries, sensed a new anchor, a new conduit, a new way out of their eternal prison. The knocks weren't a warning from the outside. They were the sound of them trying to get in. To me. And now, they were succeeding. The last night at my friend's, the knocks weren't from under the bed. They were on the bed. The terrifying, undeniable weight of something unseen pressing down on the mattress, trying to climb into me. That's why Luna, the cat, usually so oblivious, had arched her back and hissed with such primal terror. She saw them. She felt them. I am not safe. The spirits aren't looking for a new home in the manor. They're not just haunting the house anymore. They're looking for a new home in me. And I can feel them, a cold, creeping sensation, trying to slip past the barriers of my skin, trying to become one with my own desperate, beating heart. They want out, and I am their door.